Hello and welcome back to Business Talks. This is our part 2 with the canine handler from the Spokane Police Department. Of course, we had Nate Spearing on with Todd Belitz. Todd is the partner to Zeus. And Zeus, how old is Zeus?
He just turned 9.
He turned 9. So in dog years, that was a test.
I don't know.
Okay.
I went to state college, so
Yes.
He's 9.
He's 9 in dog years. Anyways, we're going to talk about policing with a canine. I'll call him an officer. I know that we talked about that. Different people refer to him in different ways. I believe he's a canine officer because he goes in the field every day and
Correct.
does just what you do, except he doesn't drive the car, right?
That's about the only thing he's not
Does he
capable
turn? Does
of
he turn
doing.
the siren on?
He tries. If I let him up front, he will try.
So you can see, he tell us about him, his breed, and just specifics.
So Zeus is a purebred German Shepherd. He was actually born in the Netherlands. He spent a period of time over there, about 12 months from what I could gather, and the breeder sold him to somebody in Germany. And I'm not certain as to why, but he spent about 6 months in Germany before one of the vendors that we have bought dogs from for years in our unit purchased him as they always do, buy these dogs and take them back to California, and then police and military test and buy the dogs there. And so he ended up coming to Spokane from Riverside, California, via Germany and via the Netherlands. And
Probably happy about that.
well, it's when they get here, they're a little confused.
Oh, are they?
They've spent a lot of time in a really small crate. They've spent a lot of time on airplanes coming from overseas, and typically, the breeders over there, there's no love into these dogs over there. It's strictly a business, either to sell to police and military, or to they do a lot of competition work with dogs over in Europe, which is why a lot of times military and police will get the dogs from Europe, because they take their dogs very, very serious. So the breeding is very clean, and typically you'll have less medical issues than you would for dogs that are basically bred here in the United States. So he came over to Spokane, and then he and I met up after he was tested and decided he was going to be our dog, and then we started a 400-hour, 10-week school together.
Wow. And you went into that school together, so you guys
Correct.
learned together. It wasn't
Yes.
you coming on board and learning how to handle him, wasn't him coming about learning what he needed to do. You guys went to school together.
Yes, and when we get these dogs, we want the most dominant type A personality dog, because we can't have these dogs shut down in the field for any reason, for any kind of fear or exposure issues. So we want a dog that's not afraid of anything. So when this dog comes over and then is paired up with us, and we have to teach this dog that, yes, you can be the biggest, baddest thing around. However, you still have to be a tick below dad. It is a proverbial dog fight for a short period of time until he understands, okay, there's a line that I can't cross. And that takes a while, and each dog is totally different as to the amount of time it takes, but it's there with each dog that we get.
Well, and you guys have been together 7 years.
Correct.
So that is a long-term relationship.
Very much so. He's the most senior dog in the unit.
He is.
Yes.
And how many dogs are in the unit?
We have 6 dogs in our unit.
Okay. And they all perform the same tasks?
Yes.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about what people think, and we talked about it on part 1, is that people think that some people might think you just send the dog in. I think Nate mentioned, somebody steals a candy bar and you send the dog in to take. That's not what this is about. You guys only send the dogs in to specific situations. What would that look like?
Well, each situation is different. And when we decide what we're going to do in deployment with a dog, we have to weigh a lot of different factors. And the biggest one is threat factors.
Okay.
And so there's case law, Graham versus Connor, that is an established case law that talks about use of force, police use of force. And there's 3 prongs to that. It's crime, threat, and resistance. And we have to weigh what's the crime, what's the threat, and what kind of resistance is this person putting up to being arrested. And we build up basically a hodgepodge of those 3 things amongst many, many other things that go into it. But that's kind of the front part of it, to where we have to make a decision. Is this a situation where it is safer for the dog to be used than a human for all people involved, not just officers, but officers, citizens, and suspects included as well. Because a lot of the time, a simple contact from a police canine is a much, much lower level of force than potentially something larger when we're face to face with this perpetrator, when they're hiding or fleeing or barricading themselves, or things that they typically do. So a lot of times we take all three of those things and mash them together to find out, okay, does this fit a deployment for a dog? And certainly a shoplifting isn't one that's going to fit that, unless a police officer goes to contact that person for shoplifting and they pull out a gun and then run and hide in a house. Now we've got something totally different, because they've shown that they're willing to produce a firearm for a simple misdemeanor crime. So that's where the threats to searching officers or the community would elevate it to a potential use of a police canine.
Okay. Can you share, is there a larger percentage of crimes that Zeus goes in first? Is there a type of crime that, I mean, I know you explained a few things, but just in your experience with Zeus, is there a certain type of crime that he goes in more often?
Well, I think if we were to categorize crimes individually, it would probably be domestic violence crimes. And the reason I say that is because we have a high volume of those, just in general in the city. And so we're at a lot of those calls. But when the thing with domestic violence crimes is you have a extremely elevated level of emotion.
Sure.
People are heated, and people go out of character a lot of times when their emotions are so high, which is why domestic violence are one of the most dangerous crimes for officers. And statistically, there's a higher level of officers shot on domestic violence crimes than many others that you would think. So we do deploy to a lot of those crimes, but we exhaust every other option prior to using any force, but in particular to use our dog. And we're fortunate in the city that we have a lot of resources that we can use prior to having to insert our dog into a place. And on a domestic violence situation, it would be a suspect that had fled and is now in the community, and we have an obligation to protect that victim. And if we don't apprehend this suspect because he's ran out the back door prior to our arrival and we have no idea where he went, we can't sit there and babysit that victim. And a lot of times victims don't want to leave their own home. And so that suspect, majority of the time, is going to come back. And so we have an obligation and a duty to protect that victim and go out and find this person. And that's where one of his senses would come into play, is his ability to use his nose to go find out where suspect went from point A to point B.
So tell us specifically, when you're talking about the different types of training, like you just said, using his senses.
That's one of the big things that we do, is that we use them because they physically have things that we just do not possess as human beings. All of their physical abilities trump ours by far. And it might be small confined spaces, us having to crawl in somewhere to find a violent person.
So under a house, or
a crawl space under a basement, attics, hidden wall space that happens a lot. Places like that, for us to crawl through there, a lot of times we would have to strip down gear in order to fit through there. These dogs are much smaller than us, even at his size, they're much smaller than us, and can work, not just make it in there, but can successfully work in that tight space. Their speed, these dogs can run in excess of 35 miles an hour. Wow. They in a straight shot, you can't outrun them. Four legs, we always say it, 4 legs always beats 2. A lot of people can outrun me, but people aren't going to outrun the dog. And their ability to jump fences and maneuver around corners, it's really slippery and icy out right now. Their ability to traverse those icy conditions with their toenails and 4 legs is much better than ours. And then their ability to see, hear, and use their nose. And we use all of those at different times, but a lot of situations we'll use them all together. And that's where they become extremely successful.
Now, the difference, and we were talking, Nate had shared a little bit with their hearing and their smell. Tell us the amplification, like give us some comparisons so we can understand. They're just more.
So when you talk about those kinds of things, and you had mentioned it earlier, you're called his ear satellite dishes, and it's exactly what they look like. That was
a compliment, Zeus.
And they will sit, and you'll see as we sit here and talk, or as I talk, I should say, his ears are going to move around. They're just going to rotate. And he's listening to everything that I say, and he's waiting for a key word that is of importance to him. Mm-hmm. And right now, in mid-sentence, if I threw one of those words out, he would pop up and partake in whatever that needs to be done. Mm-hmm. But we can send them into a building and use them to act as a sentry for us. We might send them down a hallway in a commercial building that tees off at the end and it's dark. And we might send them down all the way to the end of the hallway where both ways are of extreme threat to us. But we can send them down, and using distance control this would be off leash, is send him down there and down him, give him a command to lay down. And he would lay down, and his ears would just start to rotate because he's listening for anything that sounds of importance to him, and he will pick that up. And he can hear it about 8 times greater than we can.
Wow.
Will be
not 8 times greater than a mom of a teenager?
Probably. Depends on what you're listening for, I suppose, right? He can see better. They can see in the dark. However, they can't see completely in the dark, but they see things much better in the dark than us. But what they do see very, very well in the dark is movement. Okay. So anytime something moves, it appears to be like a flash of light to them. And so they have that ability. And then as he sits down there, he's just going to be just sniffing all the air around him. And he's just looking for that fresh human odor, because that's what he's trained on. He's trained on the odor of humans. So as that odor comes from wherever it's at, he's going to start to pick that up. And we're looking at his body for a change of behavior.
So you're looking for cues,
yes,
for physical cues from him.
Yes.
So if you see, I'm going to go back to the hallway scenario you gave us, and he's laying down and you see his ears going. Can you share what cue that is and then what your response would be?
Well, his ears are going to go constantly.
Yeah.
And just like they are now, he's picking up everything and waiting for something to be of importance. But if we send him down to a hall and we put him down there and allow him to work for us at a distance, because now we can stay behind cover at a much bigger distance than our potential threat, which studies have proven that lessens the need for force, is having us be separated, which is where they come into play. But he would do one of two things. He'd either, if the threat presented itself right to him and tried to attack him, he would defend himself. But we don't give these dogs the ability to make contact with any suspects on their own. Okay. That's something that we focus on. It's all command driven. And so he might snap his head somewhere and look. That's a clue to us that something caught his attention. Not necessarily what we're looking for, but something over there that we didn't see or hear, he picked up on. So as a handler, we have to make a decision now. Do I want to move the team up to him? Do I want to recall him back to us and continue to make challenges? So move slower through, put him on a leash and work. There's all kinds of different ways that we would actually work through that problem.
So you'd assess the situation and see what the next step would be.
It's a constant assessment every time we go in somewhere, even on a track outside. It's constantly assessing what we're doing.
And his smell. So dogs' sense of smell is incredible. For him, though, he's trained. What does that look like?
That one is absolutely amazing. So they can smell anywhere between 100 and 1,000,000 times stronger than we can. And that is breed dependent and then dog dependent as well. You take like the British Bulldogs that have trouble even breathing, right? I would say they're on the much lower scale. However, they still smell better than we do. You take a dog like a German Shepherd or a dog like him, where his snout is very long, I would say probably be on the higher end of that. But what he picks up on is we shed skin cells as we sit here. And each human, you can't control it. And if you've ever taken a dark colored cloth and rubbed it on your skin and you look at it and it's a little white or hazy, that's your dead skin cells that are coming off. And those just fall off of us. That's our natural reproduction of skin. And so he is trained to smell those. Those are called rafts. He's trained to smell and pick up on the odor of those as they hit the atmosphere and they start to decompose. And as a human, we give off about 40,000 of those a minute and up to 5 million a day. Wow. So it's constant as it's just pouring off. And so that's what he's trained to pick up the odor of and work to the source.
Well, I'm guessing adrenaline, sweat, when you've got a suspect who, a high adrenaline going on and fear.
Each person gives off a totally different odor, based on a whole bunch of different things. Gender, what you wear, what perfumes, colognes, what soaps you use, or deodorants, or lack thereof, or some of the people that we encounter. Everybody gives off a different odor, and he has the ability to tell the difference between what each person smells like, which is how we stay on the right person. If we're tracking somewhere, it's called scent discrimination. He has the ability to isolate certain odors, but that is how he picks up on those certain things and sticks with that.
So what would you say if you were to describe Zeus's personality? You said something that kind of cracked me up earlier, that the dogs tend to take on the personalities of their handlers. So I'll just preface that question with, tell me about Zeus's personality, because he's the one that's out there. He does a lot of nonprofit, a lot of stuff in the community. He's out there really as a face for the canine unit, if I could say it that way. I mean, he's probably the most visible.
I think part of that,
partner.
Yes, and there's two parts to that. He's an extremely social, fun-loving dog. People are surprised that he's a working dog based on his demeanor and his personality because of maybe things they've heard about dogs, and you can see he's very, very social. But he's also
very excited about having his toy.
Yeah, he's also been in the unit the longest, and so as things have gone and we've done lots of demos and things like that, he's been in the unit the longest. So, but he definitely enjoys those things. He loves being around people. He loves kids. He loves when kids come in and are just all over him, swarming him. I think he really takes that stuff in, and it's obviously they don't talk to us in the same way that we would talk to them. They do talk to us. He's very vocal, but I think they feel
not
like
there's
like a purpose. Right? Yeah.
Well, that leads me to a question. What's the average career span of a canine officer?
So career span will depend on how old they were when the dog started. Usually between 9 and 10 years old, you start researching and using the R word of whether or not he's going to retire. And him turning 9, I'm in that evaluation phase right now, and it's the last thing. You could ask Nate. It's the last thing I want to think about, because we've been through so much together,
yes, I can't imagine.
And really, it's starting over. There's nothing I'm going to teach him now that we haven't done before. It's about keeping him healthy and just maintenance work with him. So for him, it will, he's got just starting his 7th year now. So he might get 7.5, 8 years. I don't know. So, but typically between 9 and 10 is when you start to evaluate whether or not that dog needs to retire. And, it's one of the things that these dogs don't like retirement. It's not what they want to do. Yeah. A lot of people say, well, retire him early and let him, stay home and sit by the fire. They don't want to do that. Yeah. They really don't. When he had his surgery, I had him inside because I was feeding him every 4 hours and giving him medication and monitoring his staples and his belly. And every time I got up to do anything, he'd run to the door thinking we're going to work. And it's like, buddy, you gotta chill out a little bit. But that's all they want to do is work. That's all they've ever known.
So what happens when they retire then, if they've got this, what have you seen or experienced when they do retire? How does that go for them?
I haven't seen it firsthand. I've obviously we've had handlers in our unit that have retired their dogs and ended up training and working another one, but we get to purchase the dog. And yes, okay. So they'll come home with us. It's a handler's choice, but I've never known a handler not to purchase their dog. And it's a $1 purchase, and the only reason for that is because he's bought and paid for by the taxpayers of the city. He's a city-owned piece of property, and so it's just a transaction. It's used its service life basically for what the city could use him for, and so they offer him up to the handler, and we have to purchase him for $1 just as a transaction. So he would go home, and each dog really is dependent. It depends on what kind of personality they have. Some dogs, they live out the rest of their life as a kennel dog, but the handler, after the amount of time that they would usually spend with them prior to retirement, you've built a pretty good relationship with that dog, and I think he will fit in well. However, he's going to be neurotic because he's not going to want to sit there and not do anything.
So is there any way that Zeus can go into public life and, instead of, it still can be, be a representative of the SPD without?
We actually, it's funny you say it, because we actually talked about Paul Buckman, our senior handler in the unit. He retired a dog due to medical issues at a fairly young age. And that dog was as social as you would find. Talon was his name. And he's just a fantastic patrol dog, a fantastic SWAT dog. And he just loved people. He would just roll over and want everybody to rub his belly. And we actually have talked about that of, allowing him to come out of the house, but he has full reign of their property and house. And so he's doing just fine. But his medical condition just wouldn't allow him to go through the physical rigors that it takes to be a police dog.
So I'm going to put you on the spot. You don't have to answer. So will Zeus come home with you after he's retired?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. I didn't know if that was a trade secret, or I couldn't imagine working, having a dog for 7 years, be that close, work side by side, and to say goodbye.
Yeah, it's a tough find for them to find a home after that as well. So
I imagine
it's you can't just say who wants a retired police dog. There's too much liability involved. So he will definitely come home and live the good life. That is for sure.
So when he retires, will you bring on another partner? Do you think?
I would love to, yes.
Okay. So you enjoy having a canine?
Absolutely. My plan is whenever he does have to hang up the leash, then I will test another dog, and we'll go to one of the kennels that sells dogs, and we'll go test him, and I'll pick another dog and start all over again.
Okay. That's got to feel. But at least you're going into it now with the knowledge, whereas with Zeus, you guys learned together, correct?
True. And I was being taught by other people that were very knowledgeable when I went through my school. Having the knowledge and the experience now is great. However, there's always that thing where you go into it and you have expectations.
Sure.
I've been very fortunate with him that he's been an extremely successful dog in this city. And he's, obviously very social. And there will be expectations that aren't going to be lived up to. It won't.
He set the bar high.
Very much so. And then the thinking back to all the stuff to where, okay, we have to be extremely cautious with this and this and this. It truly is starting all over again.
Yeah. So you're going to show us a little bit of Zeus in action, or his some training points, correct? Some commands. Sure. I don't know. Are we? I didn't know anything about this. I don't know. He's pretty happy with his toy, but can you just some commands to show us his? Yeah, I mean, we know he's highly intelligent, but give us some examples.
Zeus, here.
And then I did ask you if you speak. So your commands are in English.
So he understands English, Dutch, and German. And so he's
bilingual.
Trilingual. Don't sell him short.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
Now, and I will say, and we always say this, that the languages of Dutch and German our pronunciations of things aren't meant to offend anybody, because it is our version of being able to try and get these words out. Because these dogs, and the reason for it, it's not a big secret as to try and confuse suspects, or this dog will not listen to a bad guy. There's absolutely no way. And that's one of the benefits of these dogs, is it's the only tool that a police tool, a use of force tool, that a suspect can't take from us and use against us. There's no way that he can grab Zeus and use him against me or another officer. It just won't work.
Can another officer give him commands and he'd follow it?
I don't think he would.
Okay.
We don't do that, but we don't do that because they're not certified. If they're not certified to use force with these dogs, they haven't been through the training, those kinds of things. So that would never take place.
Okay.
But when you have these situations, somebody could take a taser or a pistol or something else, OC, and use it against us, and they can't use our dog against us. And they're the only use of force tool that can be recalled as well. When you make the decision to send any other use of force downrange, whether it be a pistol, a gun, a taser, any kind of strike, OC, once you make that cognitive decision to send it downrange, you can't bring it back. Okay. When you send him downrange, if somebody surrenders, we have the ability to call him off and bring him right back to us, and that's part of our training. So, seats, los, seats, off, seats. Give it out. No. Good boy. No. Good boy. Yeah. Oh, good boy. So we train them to bark on command.
Okay.
Just here.
And is that as for intimidation?
Well, a lot of times, so we want to resolve situations with no use of force.
Yes.
And some people are just generally afraid of dogs. And whether it be that loud, deep bark that he has, his size, you see it, I mean, at night he looks like a wolf.
Yes.
And, there's those things that if we can eliminate the potential for use of force based on his presence, that's a 100% win all the way around. And that happens a lot. So case law mandates that we make announcements. So we always make announcements, and it's not a secret. They know we're there, obviously, by the time we get there, but we tell them that we're going to use the dog is going to find him, those types of things. And we'll have them bark.
Okay.
And we give them the opportunity to surrender. And a lot of times until that bark comes out, they have no intentions of surrendering. And once that bark happens, then a good portion of the time they say, yeah, I don't think I want to play this game. And they come out in a peaceful manner, and everything goes good.
Okay. Well, he's absolutely beautiful. And what a blessing that we have 6 of these beauties at the Spokane Police Department. What is your, if you can say, what is your favorite part of working with a canine partner, with Zeus in particular?
Well, he's a fantastic listener. He doesn't talk back.
Well, he does.
However,
you said he's very vocal.
Yes.
I heard him earlier.
It really, I'm in awe every time we pull this dog out of the car. Just the things that he's capable of. It truly, there's been so many situations that we could talk about to where it would not have gone that way without him there, or their other dogs for that matter. When we take these dogs out and they diffuse a situation and they find somebody, there's many, many times that without these dogs on these calls, and each handler can attest to specific situations that they have had, but there's been many times with all of our dogs that if that dog wasn't there, it would probably have been a shooting on one side or the other. Okay. And that's just due to the nature of the violence of that suspect and the nature of what was going on that call. But utilizing this as a de-escalation tool, and 90+% of those times is all it took is a presence for this dog. Okay. But so I would have to say, I'm just in awe of the things that he's capable of doing. And I tell people all the time that after he has something neat like that, we'll get in the car and I'll look back at him and I just look at him and say, man, that was pretty cool, buddy. And because it's things that we just cannot do without
Do you know
him.
what's the most surprising thing he has done?
Oh man, there's been so many. One of the things that was, we teach them to jump fences. They have the ability to jump 8-foot fences just about unassisted. 6-foot fences, vinyl, concrete, chain link, they're up and over with no problem. 4-foot, they don't even touch the fence. There was an individual that was running from him and actually got a 4-foot fence closed behind it. Instead of jumping the fence, he just put his head down and rammed through the fence and broke the shackle on the fence to get through because he didn't want to jump over it. And it was like, wow, okay, I guess we're going to go the easy way. So, but he's got that big head, so that's one that always stands out. It just shows how strong these dogs are.
They're amazing, and we are, again, so lucky to have them in the Spokane Police Department. And thank you for being a partner to
Absolutely.
Zeus. He is a show stealer. And,
he certainly is.
You guys look out. You'll see Zeus. He'll maybe be at your next auction, or you'll see him out and about in the community. Stop and say hi to Officer Belitz and say hi to Zeus. And he is pretty amazing.
He certainly
is. Such a beautiful animal. And the intelligence is out of this world. So we thank you guys for joining us and Zeus today on Business Talks. I am Lonna Smith, your host. We'll see you next time.